Hi, welcome to Gunpowder Fiction and Plot. I'm Scott.
And I'm Nell.
Today we're going to do a geography tag video.
What we've done is, I think we've both gone through a Goodreads list to start with. We've gone through the list of books that we've read ever. We've figured out which countries the authors are from and made a list of which...
Do we have a Spanish author? Do we have a Nigerian author? Do we have a Sri Lankan author? And then we figured out how many different countries we have.
Yeah, and then we've made a map. So we've each got a map now of the countries that we've read books with authors from those countries, if that makes sense. So we thought that this would be a good tag video and that other people might enjoy sort of looking at the geography of their reading. So we've done that, and then we've set up 10 questions. So the first question for this tag is, how many countries have you read books from? And my answer is 25. I actually suspect it's a little bit more than this because I've only done my Goodreads list of books from memory in like the last 12 months. So having been a lifelong reader, I suspect that there's a bunch of books missing, but I'm happy to say 25.
35 is my answer. I actually feel like I'm sort of pushing 35. I've got some dubious answers. We decided when we did this video that place of birth would be the nationality, and for older readers, older authors, that's
not older authors, but like books that were written a long time ago where borders might have changed. Say Kiev used to be part of Russia. And now we would classify that as
the Ukraine.
Thank you for helping my terrible geography skills.
Although maybe not for much longer.
Well, so for now we've got anyone born in Kiev classified as Ukrainian. So you can use an author either in their birthplace or if they later naturalise and do the bulk of their work in another country. We've allowed that also, although I don't think I've actually taken advantage of that rule. The only rule is you can only use the same author once. So, for example, George Orwell was born in India and then naturalised to the UK. You can only use him in one or the other. No Anonymous. You can't use Anonymous even if you know that Anonymous comes from a specific region. For our list of countries, we used the 195 countries on the UN list, plus we divided the UK into England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland because we're boring white people and that means gives us more countries.
Everybody, this is our dog Bryn. He likes to get involved.
He just looks like a brown blob.
He just looks like a bit of a blob there. He's a chocolate brindle coloured Staffordshire Terrier nuisance.
He's a cute nuisance.
He's cute. A couple of the things I did to push my list up is Homer, the Iliad. I originally had that down as Greek, but when I researched Homer, I found out that while he lived in part of the Greek Empire, it would now be classified as Turkey. So he's my Turkish author, which I otherwise wouldn't have had, and I was able to use Zorba the Greek as my Greek book. And The Master and Margarita, Mikhail Bergov. I'm not actually sure what his last name is. Starts with a B. He was born in Kiev, so we've counted him as the Ukraine. And Salman Rushdie, Indian British author. He is an Indian author as far as I'm counting.
Yeah. So question number 1 is, how many countries have you read books from? Scott is 35 and I'm 25. Number 2 is, do you usually consider the nationality of authors when selecting books? I don't think I ever have, really. Have you?
No, never.
Question number 3, after seeing your reading nations mapped, do you think this will change? And for me, that's a definite yes. I feel like after having looked at how many of my books are written by English or American authors, not even Australian authors, mostly English and American authors, I'm going to be much more conscious as part of reading diversely of the countries that my authors come from. Also, this is, I guess, another goal for me is to check off one from every country on the map. I think that's kind of cool.
I think maybe not the books that I'm reading, but maybe the TBR that I'm creating. I'll definitely look at countries. I was a little bit ashamed of how barren Africa was on my map. I only got one country, and that I thought was a bit of a push. So that's something that I better do better at in the future.
Okay, so question number 4 was, which country were you surprised you didn't have an author or book for? For me, this is most of Africa. I went through a period in my teens where I was really interested in African culture and books about Africa, and I really thought that I would have a lot of African authors. I have a bunch from South Africa, but that's the only country. And a lot of what I've read is by people who aren't from Africa and predominantly white UK citizens and US citizens. So that's a bit disappointing to me, and I will be definitely looking at how I can add some more African authors to my TBR.
I've got 2 real surprises. I've got a few actually. I was a bit surprised that Africa was bleak for me. I was also quite surprised I didn't have Portugal on my list. I read a lot of classics, I read a lot of old stuff, I read a lot of translations, and I was just surprised that, you know, Portugal was missing. But probably the biggest surprise for me is the amount of Jewish authors I've read without having read a single book from an Israeli author was a complete surprise to me. I just assumed that one of the European or American Jewish writers would have actually been Israeli, and I would get that somehow, but I didn't.
Okay, question number 5 is, which country were you surprised you had more than one author or book for? For me, this was India. I was really surprised at how many of authors that I had previously thought were from the UK mostly, were actually, I guess, British colonials that were born in India. But it also sort of surprised me at how much of the Indian reading I have done is not from an Indian heritage. It's British colonial authors. So again, very, very whitewashed in my reading history.
It's a hard question, really, for me. I was a bit surprised at the number of German authors I had, but not very. I was a bit surprised at the number of Greek authors I had, and I didn't really do particularly well at South America, but I had several books in Latin America, and I was surprised that I did relatively well in that area, but nothing that was a huge surprise for me.
Or a big standout on its own. Okay. Find a book that is set in its author's birth country on your list. Well, for me, I've sorted it alphabetically by author, and the top one, Alan Paton, is South African, and his book, Cry the Beloved Country, is set in South Africa, so that's pretty easy.
Well, Anne Frank, The Diary of Anne Frank, was set not just in her country, but in her house. So...
less laughter at Nazis. Okay, so that was relatively easy.
You should laugh at Nazis, then we don't take them seriously and they'll lose their power.
Like, has everyone seen that movie Jojo Rabbit that's out now? We watched it. I enjoyed it thoroughly. A bit of black comedy. Number 7. Find a book that is set in a completely different country to the author's birthplace.
I'm going to go for C.S. Lewis, The Chronicles of Narnia.
I think that's great. I'm going to go with Heather Morris, the tattooist of Auschwitz. Heather Morris is from New Zealand, and the tattooist from Auschwitz is set in Poland. Mostly.
I've read Afra Ben's Orinoco, that is based in, I think, Suriname from memory.
So question 8, have you got a country on your list where the author was born elsewhere but did the bulk of their writing in a new country?
So I've got Emma Ortez, who wrote the Scarlet Pimpernel. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing her name wrong because there's way too many consonants in her name, not enough vowels. But she was, she's got Hungarian nobility in her blood, and she moved to England and became an English lady or something. I'm not quite sure, but Hungarian English, and she lived in England most of the time.
I've got Michael Ondaatje, who was born in Sri Lanka and did most of his work in the UK. Are there any trends in the books that you chose from culturally different authoring nations to your own nationality? So these are countries that are the most different from where you live or grew up. Are there any trends to the kinds of stories or authors that you've chosen? For me, this is a really, really clear-cut trend. Everyone who is... I obviously have a fascination with first-person recounting of mainly huge genocides. I've got a Cambodian author talking about her experience under the Pol Pot regime. I've got a bunch of authors who are Holocaust survivors. That's where most of my European authors are coming from.
It's a real dark interest you have.
It really is. I'm clearly very fascinated with first-person accounts of things that are horrific within human nature. But that's a real trend for me, is that I'm not actually just picking up a voice from a different country it's a historical moment that I'm reading about. So the books that I'm getting from countries other than my own are actually quite a limited spectrum.
I got a bit of magic realism in certainly my South American section, and I know this is going to sound silly, but my Chinese book is really Chinese, my Japanese book is really Japanese.
Which country have you read that you would most like to holiday in or move to?
Well, that's quite hard. I wouldn't mind living under the Swedish or Norwegian systems at the moment. I quite like the idea of living on a Greek island too. There's something really nice about that really simple life that they capture, and of course France would be amazing.
I've got to say, I've just looked at this list and I've noticed that basically all the countries that I've travelled to are on my list of books that I've read, so that's an interesting correlation.
I do not have that same correlation. I have been to Nepal and I have not read a Nepalese writer. I am bad.
You naughty person. No, well, yeah, I don't think that I've been to a country that's not on this list. Fiji. Fiji is not on this list.
There we go.
I would like to go to Italy next. Okay, thanks. Tickets, please. So that's really the end of the questions and the geography reading challenge tag. So I'm going to include a link to the map maker that we use to make our maps that you've seen in this video, and also our country list, so that if you want to do this tag, it's easy as pie. We're tagging Scally Dandling Around with Books, Bear Reads Books, Lauren Wade, Made with Books, Paperback Dreams, Erin Go Read, Murphy Napier, Tundra Blue, Savvy Writes Books, and Bella the Homesteader. So, and probably some others once we have a look at our list. So also, if you just want to do this book, please give this challenge a go. I think it's a really interesting discussion.
Everybody is tagged.
You're all tagged. Tag. Yeah.
Ideas are powerful. They're more powerful than an unhealthy obsession with Nazis.